Matiba, thank you for being here. I know you complain that you see way too much of me very often, so I appreciate your indulgence yet again. Let's start with the good news since we last saw you, and that would be the S&P ratings upgrade. You are very consistent that you are quite ambivalent about these kinds of upgrades. You feel that they become a preoccupation that kind of detracts from the work. Is that still your position, given where we're at now?
The question you asked me is career limiting. Because my colleagues in the department, they like that. Just to put it in proper context, when I joined the department, we were already in junk stage. So I didn't have a preoccupation of saying I'm worried tomorrow that I'm going to be downgraded. Once you get an upgrade, you become anxious every time. How do I make sure that I don't get downgraded again? And that becomes, in a sense, your preoccupation. I'm saying I don't want to be preoccupied with that.
How far out do you think we are from investment grade?
I've always worked on the assumption that I need to do what is good for the country. If it translates into a good and upgrade, that's good. What is good for the country is things like, for instance, the grey listing, the downgrade, are costly for the economy. And for that reason, my preoccupation is to how do I make sure that all of these things which are costly to this economy are removed. In that sense, I get a bonus of an upgrade.
We have to speak about the bond curve. Yields at pretty much a record low at this point. The rand is looking very strong. There's obviously other factors that are contributing to that. But I think generally the optimism is quite high off of the back of last week's medium-term budget policy statement. There is this 1.8 trillion rand that is said to be sitting with the private sector that they seem to be reluctant to deploy. Is it a good time for them to do so now? And what assurance can you give that this is not just something that's going to pass in a couple of months' time, but these are reforms that are sustainable, and we're going to keep hitting our targets?
I mean, the normal narrative is that it's difficult for us to deploy these resources because there's policy uncertainty. But the difficulty you have, you don't get into grasp what that means in practice. Let me just say, we accept, for instance, we spent, for instance, 16 years trying to reform an ESCOM. It was a mistake because we spent most of our time trying to reform an institution than to make sure that there's power to the grid. Those two things are different. I normally say, as we deal with Transnet now, we're not going to repeat that template.
This approach of tough love.
What?
Tough love approach.
Yeah. What's going to be critical for how does make sure that our logistics system as a country works in the process. We try and reform Transnet as part of that broader strategy.
We're not going to get away without discussing the inflation targets. I don't know if it's your victory or the governor of the central bank's victory, but we're here now. And I want to look forward and put it in the context of next year's budget coming up in February. Yesterday, you called for comments on tax proposals. You've ruled out VAT, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I am. There's no VAT hike that's coming. But you are looking at other tax measures. Okay, they're not convinced of your response, Minister, so can you, for the record, state that a VAT hike is out of the question?
You know, I was answering this question with some people. That I was once told one aspirant president in the United States said, I'm not going to increase taxes, read my lips. I don't think any Minister of Finance can make such a bold statement. But what is my focus at the moment is that there's, of course, for a number of reasons, service delivery and other things, mistrust. South Africans, we've got to deliver services and make sure that we regain the trust of South Africans. And in the process, what we need to be focusing on is the efficiency of spending. That's my preoccupation at the moment. You will see, for instance, in the midterm budget policy statement and the budget review, when we started in May now, we already have managed to recover about 6 billion rand as part of the efficient spending. That's largely going to be our main focus, not focusing on increasing taxes. I'm not ruling them out, but not focusing on increasing taxes, but in focusing on efficient spending.
Can you speak about some of the short-term pains that we might have to suffer through in the course of implementing the inflation target? What should we be prepared for?
That comes to my point where you said that we had a difference. We didn't have any difference with the governor at all. We disagreed on the timing. I want to clarify that. We disagreed on the timing. It doesn't have the constraints I have. You know, if they can see that there's the four of them, they make an announcement. In my case, I've got a whole contingent of political parties, 10 of them, that I've got to make sure that in whatever decision I announce, there's a buy-in. And indeed, you can see none of those 10 parties object to anything in the budget. Because we've learned in the beginning of the year that one of the things we needed to do is to take into account the reality of the political environment that we operate on. So the governor and I had agreed, where we disagreed on the timing. You will remember that in delivering the budget vote of the department, I said, lower inflation is good for this economy. But what is going to be required is the timing of that. Let me fast forward. Clearly, the long-term impact is going to be positive. The short-term things we're going to be facing is on the economic side. Because that's the first thing we're going to, particularly its implication on the fiscal metrics. You will see, for instance, we're beginning to project a downward revision in revenue over the medium term. That in its own is going to have a major impact on the fiscal metrics. But over time, if you were to weigh that and the short-term challenges and compare them with the long-term benefits outweigh the short-term.
Mm-hmm. One of the next reforms that you're looking at, that you've promised, is a policy proposal that's going to be finalized next year, which is looking at the fiscal anchor. You have expressed previously some concerns around that, particularly that you might have a position where technocrats are making political decisions. Maybe you can speak to that and the preference that you have for what that fiscal anchor should look like, or at least the process leading up to its adoption should look like.
I'm dealing with South African politicians. I don't know politicians in other countries. They've first been skeptical about inflation targeting. To win that battle of inflation targeting has been, to me, an important success. To take another battle of fiscal anchor is going to be it's going to be a difficult one. Mind you, we come from an environment where the Treasury put up a ceiling of 2% on expenditure. Didn't succeed. So what you needed to do, I normally talk to my people. I said, you guys, you're good, you're technical competent, but you can't beat me on politics. You know, so when we deal with this stuff, we've got to say, what is the political economy of such a decision? Particularly now with the change, particularly in Europe, with Germany using its escape clause, and for me, pushing fiscal anchors in South Africa is going to be a challenge. Am I not going to do it? I'm preparing to do it, but the timing is going to be critical.
Mm. And you spoke about the idea of setting up a council that would have sort of broad consultation.
I don't think that's where we're heading at the moment. At the moment, we're heading in an environment, if you look at the different proposals that we put forward in the document, it's something where you constrain a new government after the elections. It sets up proposals and it's bound by parliamentary rules, in such a manner that it's going to stick to that until the next election. So you allow another government to do that. How we do that is a matter of detail. But again, we're putting a proposal mild of that nature, precisely because of the challenges we face in South Africa. People don't want even the inflation targeting, which says we're elected. We allow bureaucrats to set policy via a technical exercise. Now you want to make a fiscal policy a technical exercise as well. So it's not an easy thing. But I think with determination, political will, all of these things are possible.
Do you think that the current optimism that we're seeing is going to hold? Have we really turned a corner? Or is it just superficial at this time and point?
Look, if you ask me, I'm quite positive. I'm quite positive because the decisions we've taken, whether it's on the structural reform side, whether it's on the fiscal metric side, whether it's on anything, those are decisions which have been taken politically, having mobilized everybody else. It's going to be difficult for anybody to change it. So we're on the right course.
With the implementation of the inflation target, obviously you're saying that you have buyout, and I suppose politically you do, but we're going to have to see that also across departments. Something like the wage bill, which is a massive concern, can it be contained over the next few years? Are people going to play along with you and toe the line?
The problem that we have at the moment is a 3-year agreement. So we have 2 outer years of that agreement. For that reason, that part of the expenditure is still going to be sticky despite the inflation targeting. But we're quite convinced that as we start the next round of negotiations, we'll be guided by the new inflation regime.
The tariffs coming from the US. We've not really seen as dire of an impact as what had maybe initially been expected. Do you think that's going to hold? Or are there still going to be surprises? We know they've made this amendment now, especially with regards to agriculture. Is that good news for you?
Yeah, that's good news. But parallel to that, what people are knowing is that we have been discussing with the Americans from day one. We're still in discussion with them as of today.
So they are still talking to us. The door is not closed.
Yeah, the door is not closed. In fact, we made a substantive submission to them. They've come back and kind of critiqued it. We're revising our submissions to them. I can't go into detail because what we have not avoided to do is to negotiate with them through the media. But we are in serious discussions with the United States of America. And at the beginning, the negotiations were not that constructive. They are constructive now. I mean, I know I'm not up to take about. There was a ridiculous thing. They would make submissions. They say, you guys are not ambitious enough. We make another ambitious submission. They said, no, we are still not ambitious enough. Oh, what does ambition mean? But they've made all of a sudden a 360 degrees and put proposal on the table. We may not be happy with them. No one is happy. This isn't the nature of negotiations. Yeah.
Let's end it off on the politics as we draw to an end. You've always had this position, and you've touched on elections. Obviously, we've got the municipal ones coming next year. But your view is that the markets like to see the ANC in power. You believe, and if I'm putting words in your mouth, you can correct me. There's a level of stability to that. My sense is that the ANC is not going to make a comeback next year. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. What does that mean for investor confidence if we see this change or an additional change to what we saw last year in terms of the trend continuing with the loss of electoral support for the ANC?
Let me to answer that question, you must pose a question to yourself. Is there any other party in the country that's likely to get 40%? Which will make that the ANC then will not be part of the equation? My answer is no. No party in the country at the moment will marginal vote to the extent of being about 40%, even 2029. If that happens, and the ANC sink, I don't know I can't recall what are the implications of that, whether you can see a DA and an MK or a DA and an EFF trying to forge a deal. I don't know how practical that is.
So the ANC is not going to make a recovery, though. You agree on that?
No, we are. No, we would not be in this space if we don't want. We're unlike the ACWA. I nearly made a reference to another party. I'm saying we don't belong to a political party just for the sake of being in a political party. You belong to a political party because you want to run the government.
Mm-hmm. Maybe the last part, then. What can the ANC do between now and next year's election to win some favor back from voters?
Watch the space.
On that note, then, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Merci.
Yeah?